What is going on, guys? Matt O'Leary here with another video, and today what I wanted to do was get into the New York Jets wide receiver core because it's been highly debated whether or not the New York Jets have enough at the wide receiver position to be competitive in 2023. Now, naturally, they have a very good number one receiver in Garrett Wilson, but after that, they don't have that really good high-end number two. They have a solid wide receiver room, but is it enough? So what I want to do is compare the Jets to the other AFC playoff teams from a year ago and talk through the different wide receiver cores we've seen make the playoffs last year and how the Jets compare. So we're just going to look at the top four. Yes, it helps that the Jets have depth beyond that. Randall Cobb, most likely a wide receiver 5. It's up for debate if Denzel will be wide receiver 6 or maybe a UDFA that they brought in. But moral of the story, in some order, right? It's going to be Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Corey Davis, and Mecole Hardman as the Jets' top 4 receivers going into the 2023 season. So how does that compare to the teams who made the playoffs last year? So we'll start with the Buffalo Bills, whose top 4 was Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, and Shakir. That is a really good number one wide receiver in Stephon Diggs, an elite level number one wide receiver. Gabe Davis and McKenzie are like, they're okay. I kind of put them in a similar tier of receiver as the Lazard and Corey Davis of the world. So I think, and Shakir is not as, I wouldn't put him in the same category as like a Mecole Hardman or Corey Davis, whatever order you want to put that in. But having Diggs really takes this one over the top. So I would give the Bills a slight edge here, but I don't think it's like some runaway because I think Garrett Wilson in year 2 has a chance to really do a ton of damage, but not, at least we could say not far off from the Bills receiving core. I think you could put them in a similar kind of wide receiver tier. The Dolphins, they have a better wide receiver room because their top 2, they have 2 number ones in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They also have Sherfield and Wilson as well to round that room. Depth, their number 3 and number 4 is not as good as the Jets' number 3 and number 4, but the 1 and 2, the 1-2 combo, both guys had over 1,000 receiving yards last year. That is definitely a better wide receiver core than what the Jets have. The Baltimore Ravens, woof, wide receiver core. Robinson, Watkins, Deshaun Jackson, Andy Isabella was their top 4 wide receivers last year. The Jets absolutely have a better wide receiver core than the Baltimore Ravens. Granted, they run the ball a ton. They also have a great tight end in Mark Andrews. These things matter, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yes, I would say the Jets have a better wide receiver core than the Baltimore Ravens. The Bengals, they don't touch the Bengals. Their top 3 is really good. Chase, Higgins, Boyd, and Irwin was their 4th wide receiver. Chase and Higgins, that's a lethal 1-2 punch. Boyd is also really solid. To me, that's the best wide receiver room in the conference. Just absolutely incredible stuff. No, the Jets wide receiver room doesn't compare, even if Garrett Wilson takes that step like Jamar Chase did in his career, going from a rookie to a sophomore year, and just how impressive he was. As for the Jacksonville Jaguars, they had Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, and Jamal Agnew. I would say that the Jets' wide receiver core is slightly better than that because I think Garrett Wilson's a significantly better number 1. But Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, and Jamal Agnew, kind of similar boat for the Jets from the 2 to 4 range. The Chiefs' wide receiver room, not great. They have an all-world tight end, so that really makes things up, and they have the best quarterback in the sport, so that also makes things up. But they had Juju, Tony, Valdez-Scantling, and Moore as their number 4, as their top 4 wide receivers last year. Again, not really great, but when you look at just having an elite level tight end, best tight end in the sport, best quarterback in the sport, it didn't really matter for them because of just how good some of these other guys were. But yes, I would say the Jets have a better receiving core than last year's Kansas City Chiefs. And finally, the Chargers top 4. They were the last team to make the playoffs. Allen, Williams, Palmer, and Carter. Allen really struggled last year. Williams was pretty solid. Palmer was pretty nice for them last year. But I would say a comparable unit to what the New York Jets are running out there. So the Dolphins and Bengals to me are the 1 and 2 clear cut better when looking at the AFC. And looking at specifically the playoff teams from last year in the AFC, they are obviously those two teams are far and away a better unit. But is the Jets unit really that different from those other teams that we just rattled off? Not really. I mean, last year, here were the numbers for the Jets' top four. Wilson had 1,100 yards as a rookie with a million different quarterbacks playing. Lazard went for 788. Davis, 536. Hardman, 297 in only 8 games. So, like, over a full season, let's just do some rough projections. We don't necessarily have to get into, the nitty gritty, but let's say 1,300 for Wilson, 800 Lazard, 500 a pop for Davis, Hardman, plus or minus a little bit. That's 3,100 yards right there through the air without factoring in any other wide receiver on the roster, the running backs, or the tight end. And that's really where I think this, comes from is, yes, the Jets wide receiver core is deep. They don't have they have a good number one in Garrett Wilson. There's no denying that. And then they have solid guys from 2 through 4 and pretty okay depth with your number 5 wide receiver. But that's not factoring in any of the running backs on the roster. Breece Hall was on his way to being the offensive rookie of the year. Yes, he's coming back from an injury, but there's still no doubt in my mind that he's going to be a very good running back this year. On top of potentially a Michael Carter bounce back, you have Zonovan Knight, who was really good for you last year. You also have our guy that you just brought in, Abanaconda, Izzy, our man. So they have a ton of weapons at the running back position. And then tight end also. Yes, they don't have a cream of the crop tight end like Andrews or what the Kansas City Chiefs do in Travis Kelce, but I think they have many capable tight ends on this roster, whether you look at Tyler Conklin or CJ Uzama or potentially Jeremy Ruckert's role developing and getting more involved this year. And they took Kuntz as well, who's someone who is an extremely effective pass catcher and someone who could probably have over time develop into a nice receiving role at this level. But to answer the question of do the Jets have enough at the wide receiver position, I think they do. And, Robert Saleh's made it clear that Corey Davis is going to be here. It was we were operating under the assumption that, earlier on, if you get Odell or you landed DeAndre Hopkins or whatever wide receiver you bring in here, that Corey Davis would probably be the odd man out. But Corey, obviously, as a 1 or number 2 at this point in his career, probably don't love that. But as a 3rd or 4th option, with Hardman as your 3rd or 4th option, with Lazard as a number 2, I like Allen Lazard, and he obviously is very comfortable with Aaron Rodgers as they work together in Green Bay. Red zone threat, the back shoulder throw to Lazard, I think is going to be something we see. And like Garrett Wilson, just how deadly he can be this upcoming year. He had 1,100 yards with Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, Mike White, and Chris Streveler throwing him the football. What could he do with Aaron Rodgers? So to answer the question, yeah, I think the Jets wide receiver room is good enough. You let me know in the comments below how you think the wide receiver room is. How does it compare to other teams around the league? Once again, I am Matt O'Leary. I'll catch you next time.